Hi, I'm Steve, Volunteer Director at Large with the Vancouver Island Security Research Society. BSides Vancouver Island is just around the corner. And if you haven't secured your tickets yet, now's the time. Don't miss your chance to be part of one of the most anticipated InfoSec events on the island. This is your last big chance. On October 3rd, BSides Vancouver Island is taking over the Victoria Conference Center, and it's going to be huge. We're talking world-class talks and the kind of passionate networking that only happens at a grassroots event like this. Now, here's the deal. We sell out every single year, and we're really close to capacity. Once those tickets are gone, that's it. No extra seats, no late entry, no standing room. So if you're thinking about coming, don't wait. You do not want to be the person watching everyone's highlight reels after missing the event of the year. Today, I'm proud to spotlight Wade King's talk, CBC Padding Oracles in 2025. Wade's research is shaking up how we think about encryption. If you build, defend, or rely on secure systems, this session is a wake-up call, and it's only happening at BSides VI. This is eye-opening research for anyone developing or defending secure applications. Wade, I'd love to invite you to introduce yourself to our BSides Vancouver Island community and share a little about your journey in cybersecurity. What drew you to research encryption vulnerabilities and why the risks around CBC padding oracles matter so much in 2025?
Sure thing. So I started this journey about a year ago, kind of thinking that CBC was mostly dead. It wasn't really used too often. Padding oracles were something a little bit more archaic. And then when I was working on a bug bounty for a gambling platform, I discovered that the password reset token was vulnerable to padding oracle, and I was able to use it for account takeover. And then later in my own work, I discovered another padding oracle vulnerability in a token that allowed me for another account takeover. And then I found it again in another different client that was in the session cookies. So through my work, I've started to realize that CBC is in a lot more places than we expect, and it can cause quite a lot of issues because developers sometimes expect that the plaintext resulting from decrypting CBC is going to be trusted, when in fact it can easily be manipulated.
Thank you very much for sharing that eye-opening example. Going to be an interesting talk. Let's get things rolling. I've prepared 3 questions to give our community a bit more of a glimpse into this talk. First, CBC encryption keeps appearing in developer toolkits and AI model suggestions. What do you see as the biggest danger of developers blindly adopting CBC without understanding its potential vulnerabilities?
It mostly comes down to what is trusted user input and what isn't. A lot of times when developers are using CBC encryption, they assume wrongly that the resulting plaintext can't be manipulated by an attacker. And using a padding oracle, or simply just by modifying the ciphertext, you can cause predictable outcomes in the resulting plaintext, which you can sometimes use to tamper with strings that are meant to be secure. And you can sometimes use that to take over accounts or do all sorts of nefarious things.
Thank you very much. Second question. Your research includes a new method for extracting a padding oracle without causing a padding error. How does this technique work in brief, and what kinds of systems or situations are most at risk from this subtle attack?
So typically the way a padding oracle attack works is you need 2 different error messages. You need a data error and you need a padding error. The padding error is something that's returned by the cryptographic library. And so what a lot of developers do when they have a padding oracle that they're vulnerable to, they will often cause the error messages to be the same. So they'll put a little try catch block around it, and they'll have output the same error message if it's a padding error or a data error. The issue with this is that what one person can do is it can put 2 CBC ciphertext blocks, tokens, side by side. And if the backend server stops after parsing the first set of tokens that it expects and ignores everything else, you can actually turn any data error into a padding error, because you're operating on the unchecked version, essentially. And so any error you can generate on that unchecked string will always be a padding error. And you can use that to perform the classic padding oracle without an error.
Finally, your abstract mentions uncovering the initialization vector and decrypting the first block when the IV is static and enough samples are present. Can you walk us through how this attack unfolds in practice and what defenses modern orgs should consider to prevent it?
So this one is a bit more of a niche case. It's not entirely useful a lot of the time, but it can be very interesting, especially for gathering a little bit more information on what the first block contains. Because typically in a padding oracle attack, the intermediate block is what's combined with the previous ciphertext or the initialization vector. And that's why when you're doing a padding oracle attack, you can reveal the plaintext of anything except for the first block, because that first block depends on the initialization vector, which is hidden on the server. You do get the intermediate block, though. And what you can do is that intermediate block combined with the initialization vector, whatever it is, must be plaintext. It must be some sort of ASCII characters or anything like that. So if you can restrict a range on what that output is supposed to be, you can build enough different initialization or intermediate block bytes in order to create a big list of numbers that you can use to eliminate any guesses at initialization vector byte. So essentially, when I'm going through the intermediate block byte by byte, I'm going to take the byte from the intermediate block and I take a guess at what initialization vector it could be, and I'm going to look at the resulting plaintext. And if that plaintext is outside of the allowed range, I know that's an invalid guess for the initialization vector byte. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through as many different intermediate block bytes as I can to eliminate as many guesses as I can for the initialization vector. And when I'm left with only one valid byte for initialization vector, then I know that's the valid initialization vector byte. And so I can use that to byte by byte discover the initialization vector, as long as I have enough different intermediate block bytes. It's a bit of a lengthy explanation,
No,
but
this is
I
great.
hope I'll be able to.
This is great. And
Yeah.
this is why people need to come to BSides VI and see the PowerPoint that will be associated with this. Thank you very much for sharing that. That's great. So on that note, secure tickets right now at bsidesvi.com. Check out our full agenda packed with breakthrough content, expert speakers, and real community buzz. And for those who love sharing, hit our socials. Find the links at bsidesvi.com and use hashtag BSidesVI. This is your chance to join the island's most passionate InfoSec minds in person. Remember, we're almost sold out. Take 30 seconds, pause the video, and buy your tickets before someone else grabs your spot. Don't regret missing out. See you October 3rd at BSides VI.